Well, hi there, folks. As always, we'll just give a few moments for people to come onto the live stream before we roll right into today's subject, which will be the term natural law not meaning what many people seem to think that it means, and it not being magic or mysticism that can make you immune to the legal system. Whether or not that should be the case is not really relevant to what I'm talking about today. And let's see people coming on board. And I guess we'll get off into it today. Well, hi, folks. Welcome to Miyagi Mornings, episode 137, as we talk about a subject that came up in the MeWe post for Miyagi Mornings that I thought it's probably really beyond time that I did this, and I may need to play this segment on air during a regular show for the people that don't listen to the recap on the podcast, because occasionally I have guests that invoke this very subject, and they often invoke it from the way that I don't think that word means what you think it means, and that is the term natural law. There's actually two ways we can look at natural law from a standpoint of being people who believe in liberty and freedom. And one is in the same vein as this way that it gets used, but it doesn't mean what is claimed. And the other is just a much more natural principle that we can look at. So let's start out with where I go, yeah, I don't think so. There are proponents of the concept of natural law who rope this in with the entire kind of sovereign citizens movement and other things, where it's almost like you're watching like a late night TV show. If you learn the magic words, you can drive without a license, never pay taxes again. Does that sound great? Well, just wait, because there's more. And it's almost like this kind of reverse mysticism of the state. Like, since we all actually know the state is just basically a big pile of mysticism, these vaulted figures over here have this power because people elected them. And you agreed to this this contract that you've never seen or signed. You're still party to this contract that says these people have. That is mysticism. It's also, though, backed up with a shitload of force. And there are a large number of people who seem to actually believe that if they simply say the right words or don't say the wrong words, that none of the laws that apply to the commoners apply to them. They'll say, well, I'm not to be judged under this form of law. I'm to be judged under maritime law or whatever. And this is all dangerous nonsense. There's a lot of nonsense that people believe, and it's overall harmless. I was picking on the flat earth people last week a little bit because, well, they were vocal and sticking their heads up like the mole that needed whacking. But if you want to believe the earth is flat, dude, go ahead. Like, that's not really dangerous. Like, you're not going to drive a car recklessly because you believe the earth is flat. You're not going to not think that, even though you're denying physics, you're not denying physics enough that you're like, gee, people think that turn can be taken at about 30 miles an hour, but I bet I can do it at 130 because the earth is flat. That's not going to likely happen. And if you're that dumb, it wouldn't matter why you justified it. You'd probably do it and kill yourself and hopefully not other people at the same time anyway. So it's a harmless belief in bullshit. And lots of people get out and they sell bullshit because it makes for some of the most popular channels on YouTube and other platforms that there are. People love the whole conspiracy. That's why there's a show called Ancient Aliens, because people love to believe in things that are counter to natural beliefs or to what is best known. And sometimes those people are right, and a lot of times they're just wackadoodles. And a lot of times I think the people behind it aren't as crazy as they seem. They just know that they'll get eyeballs and it's a way to make money and they're entertainers. And all of that I'm fine with, up until you lead somebody to believe if I just file these certain papers and say these certain words, I'll never have to pay income tax again. And I want to head something off because I know it's coming. But you don't know. I've been doing this for 15 years now. I haven't filed a tax return in 15 years. Nothing's ever happened to me. Yeah, and there's a guy not far from here that I'm pretty sure sells meth every day out of his front door, and he hasn't been arrested either yet. And it doesn't mean if some of the people around him don't eventually make enough phone calls The sheriff's department's not going to show up with a warrant, kick his door in, seize all his meth-making supplies, and arrest him. Most of you probably can say, there's a person somewhere that I know of engaging in highly illegal activity that seems to get away with it. You don't then turn around and say, well, it's because they said special words. If anything, it's because they paid special people special money that they're getting away with it, or they're just not yet on the radar. They're not yet worthy of going after what have you. And if you think that you can say something like, I am a sovereign being and I do not stand under the authority of your court, and you can make all the laws that apply to everybody else not apply to you. If you think you can drive your car down the road with your own freaking license plate that you made up yourself and do that in perpetuity forever with no license, no insurance, no registration, and you're never going to get arrested for it, or you're never going to have fines enforced on you for it, you're delusional. And that's where a lot of this stuff comes from, that because I'm going to stand under natural law instead of man's law, your law doesn't apply to me, and that there's some combination of paperwork and filings and removal of filings and what have you, and your birth certificate is really a stock certificate that's borrowed against, and you can find out how much you're worth. And this is all stupid. None of this has any merit at all. It's dumb. And I had a guest last week that teetered into it and was in danger of going overboard with it, and I pulled her out of it, and we went other places, because otherwise she was an exceptional guest. Maybe it was the week before last. It was either last week or the week before last, and I didn't want it to ruin what was a great show. And the reason I don't generally take, and there's some people I really respect that are smart people, they're not flat earthers, but they may as well be, for how much they've deceived themselves into believing that this shit's real. It's not. They will put you in jail. They do not give two shits what you say. And you know, there's things that I've heard some of these people say that are just asinine. So they'll say, like, so when you're in court, the judge will look at you and say, well, you've been charged with blah, 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 and you face up to blah, 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 blah. Do you understand? And when you say yes, you're not saying that you understand one word. You're saying that you understand two words. It's a little trick they play on you, where you then contractually agree to stand under the authority of that court. You can stand in that court and say, Your Honor, I do not stand under anything here. And as you've asked it, I do not understand. However, I comprehend what you're saying, and we can proceed if you feel that we need to. Or you can say any magic words you want. And you know what? You can sit there and say nothing, and you can still be convicted, and you can still be held liable, and you can still be fined or thrown in a cage. And no magic words are going to make that go away. Now, some of these people will point to, well, this person came to my house and they said that they had a right to do these things, and I told them to go screw off, and I said these following awesome words in this order. Those are the magic words, but they're not the magic words under natural law. Those are the magic words of knowing their own laws, their own codes, and their own rules, and explaining their own rules to them. And it's actually no different than the police come to your house. We'd like to search the house, Mr. Spearcoat. Do you have a warrant? No. Goodbye. Well, we'll go get one. I'll see you later. Bye-bye now. You know what kind of people require a warrant? Yes, smart people. Bye-bye now. Right? Like, that's not standing under natural law. That's standing under U.S. and in my case, Texas state law. No warrant, no entry. Bye-bye now. See how simple that is? And that's always only contingent upon the person who has this state-granted authority actually recognizing their own rules, because we all know they break their own rules all the time. So an entity, which is basically a criminal gang, that's what the government is, that constantly breaks its own rules all the time, that puts people in prison against its own rules all the time, that constantly ignores its own standards for itself all the time. You think you're going to pull some magic conjured bullshit out of your ass, and they're going to recognize your magic is stronger than their magic. That's what this argument is. So where do we get where we have relevancy in this concept of natural law? Two places. One, it absolutely can be argued in court. It absolutely was, for a large period of history, argued in court. You can go out and research why lawyers stopped doing it, and the big answer is because in most cases, It ceased working. And if you hire a lawyer, you don't want them to do the thing that is like the best thing for the balance of all things in the universe. You want them to do the best thing to get the outcome that is most favorable to you. That is the purpose of an attorney. You've been charged with a crime. You either want to get you want it either thrown out, you want a not guilty verdict, you want an innocent verdict, you want dropped charges, you want at a bare minimum a reduction in the charge so that if you are convicted, you're convicted of a lesser charge with less consequences. That's what you want. You want some kind of outcome like that. So here would be an example of natural law trying to be invoked. Let's say that I was growing a whole bunch of big plants that get these nice little buds on them. And they're not the kind that the state of Texas says I'm allowed to grow now. They're the kind that they say I'm not allowed to grow. And I argue in court that it is natural law that dictates that me having plants growing on the property, which I rightfully own, is in no way a crime against the state or any other human being. That this is natural. That I should be able to control the plants that grow on my property. I completely agree with that argument. And you know what it'll do in court of law? Absolutely nothing, including when you say you do not stand under their authority. It won't matter. You're still going to freaking prison for growing, illegal cannabis, at least in this state, especially the kind of quantity I have in my head here, this big cannabis forest, right? You're going deep in the pen. You're going so far back into jail, they're going to have to pump sunlight in with a straw for you. That's what's going to happen. And it doesn't matter. But we can argue from that point. The problem with arguing from the point of this charge or this thing that we are now in a court of law over is being defended from a standpoint of we're standing under natural law here, that this law should not exist in the first place. You basically have conceded that you have violated the law as written if it is your only defense. If it's an adjunctive defense, maybe that's a Hail Mary worth trying. See if it works. Your lawyer will probably advise against it because it still infers. So basically what you're saying is, yes, I really did these things that you accused me of, but I should be allowed to do them anyway. That's a basic defense that you're using there. Because God said so, or the natural observations of humans, and these things are endowed to us by our creation or by our existence. This is not dependent on the belief in a specific deity or even a deity at all to use natural law as a defense. And I believe in the validity of this defense. I'm just telling you it doesn't work. The real place that natural law fits into our lives as anarchists, voluntarists, agorists, even libertarians, because sooner or later you'll see that leaving a little bit of the cancer behind doesn't work, libertarians, is simple. It is about us governing ourselves and our own lives. That's the important part. Natural law is that if you observe how humans treat other humans, there are things that if you do them, they will eventually harm yourself, they will harm your children, and they will harm others, and hence they should not be done. That if you were to take a look at something like slavery, you could actually argue for or against it using natural law, depending on where you go for your authority. Your authority, right? Right, like Cartman. So if you view the Old Testament of the Bible as your authority, you'd say, since there's a rule set out by God who is above all things for how to keep slaves, as long as those rules are followed, it's okay. If you were to use natural observation, which is the true foundation of natural law, i.e., when these things occur, is it good or bad for humanity? You would argue from a different standpoint that clearly wherever we've instituted and implemented slavery, it has been a bad thing for humanity. It's had horrible consequences. Therefore, it goes against natural law as observed by logic and reason in human society, which I think is a much more level-headed, logical way to make that argument. But either way, you would be arguing for natural law, which shows in of itself, just pointing to something and calling it natural law is still subject to the individual making the argument. It is either subject to some sort of religious authority, God on high, dictated in this particular group of books or book, right? Because your religious belief and my religious belief may not be the same. Therefore, we have to use different books for whatever supposedly natural law is. How would you like that being done under the name of the Islamic faith, under a strict interpretation of the Islamist faith? that we have going on in many parts of the world today, saying we're going to govern from natural law that way. So kind of the more logical, the more prudent way to use natural law is, again, the observation. It is real world karma, whether energetic or just simply consequence based. If you're a shitty person to people, people in time will be shitty to you, because people don't like shitty people. They don't like being treated like shit, and it will come back and it will hurt you. If you harm others, it will come at your own expense in time. If you steal from others, it will come at your own expense in time. This is the natural law by which we come away with the basic non-aggression principle, right? And the basic overall guidance of everything we believe as true liberty-loving people. If you're actually liberty-loving, your guiding principle should always come back to what? Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. That is the foundation of true natural law. That when that rule is broken, it causes pain. It causes suffering. It causes bad things to happen. And so natural law is in direct conflict with the concept of a state. But again, and I believe that, I also will freely admit this is my interpretation of this thing. And you can't have something that's like all overriding and all powerful when it itself is subject to interpretation by individuals. Because if you get into any situation because you're facing a minor charge because you were driving with a piece of paper you made for yourself, you called a driver's license or a license plate of some sort, and you were saying that I was traveling freely and therefore your driver's license system and registration system does not apply to me, what's going to happen is you're going to end up sooner or later in that process in front of a judge. And that judge it's going to be that judge's subjective opinion as to whether or not your defense, if we got to the point where maybe it became a jury trial, it could even be to the point where that judge will determine whether or not the jury is even allowed to hear your defense. You could be not denied the ability to provide for your own defense from the angle or with the information you wish to provide. It happens all the time. It's usually a travesty of justice when that is done. I think that if a person has any information at all relevant to what's going on in their defense, they should be able to present it. I can't think of the guy's name. Scott Peterson, for instance. This is a high-level criminal trial. This is a guy that was convicted of killing his wife, who was pregnant at the time, and dumping her body into the bay out in California. Well, his defense attorney got a boat that was the same size as his client's boat, put a dummy in it that weighed as much as his pregnant wife, got a guy that weighed as much as Scott Peterson, put it on a pond and said, okay, dump the body out of the boat. And every time the guy tried to stand up and maneuver this dead weight body out of the boat sank. Now, that doesn't prove he did or didn't do it, but it is certainly relevant to the argument. You know what the judge said? Inadmissible. So the defense attorney was never able to provide that information to the jury. Oh, but you're going to go into court and tell the judge that you don't stand under his authority and you don't agree to the stipulation of the court, and therefore it doesn't apply to you. Yeah, that's going to work. That's going to work great. Sure it is. And you can write all the books you want. You can set up all the online courses. You can have all the experts you want wheeled in, and that is not going to change this. But it also won't change the concept of natural law. It won't change that there is a natural law to how humans should treat each other and that we're all better off when we follow it. It won't change that there are natural laws. I said this, all the way back in 2008, I did a podcast. I think the first time I ever said there are natural laws like gravity. And I'm not talking about the physics-based scientific law of gravity. There's an observable law that exists whether the science is there for it or not. You drop something, it falls. And if you happen to drop yourself off a building, you will experience a consequence of going splat. We call that a deceleration injury. It sucks, and the higher you go, the worse the impact is going to be, and the more likely you will be crippled for life or die. That's natural law, and the rest of it should all be seen that way, with an understanding that sometimes any individual, being a human, is capable of making mistakes and could get that interpretation wrong, which is why true natural law should be backed up by decades, centuries, millennia of observation. Humans behaving this way, generally experience this consequence. This consequence overall is good or bad from a standpoint of it alleviates suffering or it causes suffering. That's it at its most basics. Now, there's actually a really great in-depth article critically examining the concept of natural law on the Heritage Foundation website. And there's a link in the video notes today where you can read that. And if you want to start learning more, it's where I would start. And I would say that there are a lot of really great books that are written from the standpoint of using natural law to argue, basically from a jurisprudence concept. And they make great points, but they don't change the reality of the system that you live in. Let's put it this way. Most of us would agree under natural law, it is wrong for one person to take the property of another person, which has been rightfully acquired. But if you're walking through a back alley and 5 thugs come out and point guns at you, like 2 of them have guns and 3 of them have bats, and they're fixing to bash your body in, and they say, what we want from you is your wallet, and if you give us your wallet, we will let you go, saying you are violating natural law, will result in another natural law playing itself out, which is when people are malicious and they have the upper hand, they will use the malicious nature to get what they want from you. It may be ethically and morally wrong, but it is still a natural law that people behave this way. So what you will do if you have any brains at all is you will, if nothing else, you will feign compliance, if not comply. You will give up your wall in that situation because you don't have a better option. Maybe you will feign compliance. Maybe you're armed. Maybe you'll use it as misdirection. But one way or another, you're not going to stand there and think, well, if I use magic words, they'll all go away. You're not going to stand there and go, you know what? Being like this to people is lame. Why don't you be nice and expect that those magic words are no more likely to work than saying God Almighty has decreed that you should not steal, or the nature of the universe is if you steal from me today, it will harm you tomorrow. Those people don't care. If you think that those people aren't exactly the same as your government, you have not identified the problem and you do not understand the problem. In fact, many of the painful consequences we're dealing with right now are because right now we exist as a planet in a state where we are outside the realm of good natural law. As long as we have humans ruling over other humans without their consent, we are in violation of natural law. But it does not change reality. It does not change these people have power. It does not change that they will use it against you, and no magic words will ever make it so. With that, let's go ahead and wrap up the podcast today. We'll be back together with another episode. I got to say, I expected a hell of a lot more resistance in the comments there. And it's not like we don't have anybody watching today. I expected a whole lot of, you don't know, man. I guess, I never need to underestimate my audience. You guys are a lot more switched on than a lot of folks in this realm. I'm sorry I lost confidence there. I guess it had to do with how much flat earth crap I heard last week. I don't have it for you right now, but I am going to maybe have it ready for the next flat earther that comes at me. Just an awesome beatdown on flat earth belief systems, because I was asked to logically diagnose and prove why flat earth is stupidity last week, and I'm not wasting my time on it at all. I'm just not going to do that. But there's plenty of it out there, and the one I saw was like, I think the guy's name was Professor Dave, and man, he was it was brutal. He kept having this little graphic come up with this little like elevator music playing and the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it's like, you are here at the top of the curve. It was a beatdown of beatdowns. Really enjoyed it. So what do you guys think about natural law? Do you think I got it right today, or do you think I'm off my rocker? I'll give you a couple seconds for the delay to catch up. And, I will take a look at the comments in a second. I'm just going ahead and rendering out this audio. I'm multitasking today. I'm really behind today, guys. That's why I'm so late. Miyagi Mornings usually comes out, about 10 o'clock, 10:30, and it's 1:30 right now, and I haven't even started the podcast yet. I wish the earth was flat so they would go to the end and fall off. That'd be great. And the flat earth people are fun, man. Do you know nobody's even allowed to go to Antarctica? And that Professor Dave guy had like all these guys in cruise ships, like out, like watching penguins and shit. And it's like, whatever, man. A lot of gaps, but the words you speak are true. Gaps. Well, it's a 20-minute segment, dude. I can not cover everything in it. That's what you get for being on the Float stream. Let's see what people are saying on Float. Trying live on Float now. Was on Library. It took a while for the stream to start, but working now for me. And somebody else saying you got it right. Yeah, I'll tell you guys what. If you want to watch on Library, I think people seem to have been having better results watching that stream on the Odyssey domain or in the Odyssey app than watching on the Library domain or the Library desktop application. It absolutely is the case that seems, from what people have told me, to work better. So he says, I got 16 plants. He. I bet you I know what kind of plants you have. Patriots for truth. Good for you, man. Good for you. Anyway, guys, I am a little bit behind today, and I needed to do this one because I do get guests that go off in this world of lawlism, and I just want you guys to know, when you're listening to the podcast, if you ever hear a guest do something, you're like, Jack's probably not on board with that, and I don't really go into it with them, and it just kind of goes away. It's not a sanctioning of their belief. It's since I want to have a 1-ish hour discussion with a guest, and I want that to be productive, and I guarantee you I have not brought them on to talk about how you cannot pay taxes by being a sovereign citizen. I'm going to deny that guest form request, and they happen. And it's just like, we're not going to do this because we're going to spend an hour and a half debating. And I'm all for debate. I'll debate any subject that I claim to have knowledge of that somebody takes exception with. I'll debate you in a live stream. I'll bring you on right here. We'll get a third-party moderator. We'll agree to rules, and I'll debate you. I am not debating you on my podcast because that is not what my audience has spent 13 years tuning in to hear. They've tuned in to hear, how do I get this shit done that I want to get done in my life? How do I discern what's important in my life from this thing? So when I get a guest and they start going wackadoodle over 5G, or they start going wackadoodle over the earth being flat, or they start going wackadoodle over, you don't need a driver's license to drive or anything. Well, we're just going to segue out of that. And I generally don't edit it out because I find that to be journalistically dishonest. Instead, what I'm going to do is, we're going to go talk. Like, it's kind of like when you're at your, let's say your father-in-law, your mother-in-law's place. And he's like, man, I hope they get rid of politician XYZ. And you totally disagree and you don't even want to talk about it. So you're like, hey, did you see how the Cowboys played like shit last weekend? Like, it's that. That's what I'm doing. I just wanted y'all to be able to know that. And and I used to be an apprentice baiter. Now I'm a master baiter. Good for you, Dan. Are you a master debater, though? Anyway, guys, I'm going to let y'all go. Hope you enjoyed this one. I didn't give as much notice of it as I usually do. But, man, I'll tell you what. If you want like a good joke, go watch some of these flat earth people. The mental gymnastics these guys go through to make their theory work is amazing. And I will see if I can come up with the Professor Dave rebuttal, because it is an academic beatdown like I have never seen before. And clearly he cares about this more than I do, because there's no way I'd have the time to go through and line by line debate something this stupid. There's so many things out there and that's the thing. Like, do you know what I think we should be debating? And I'm not talking about any individual subject right here. I think we should be debating things in public without censorship that both sides can have legitimate points. If we want it, we're going to debate how to defend against a specific accusation. And I said natural law is bunk in this. And you said I have ways it can be used credibly. You may be wrong, but I think that would be a worthy debate, because we could then drill down to a place. If we were going to debate whether or not a specific medication works for a specific illness, I think having a rigorous scientific intellectual debate about that is valid, because, the studies say it is irrelevant if you understand about anything about how the scientific industry works today. But if we're going to get into, like, is the earth flat or not? I you know what? even that Professor Dave video, I was doing like 3 other things when it was on. Like, I don't have time to dedicate to that, and I try to bring you guys content worth your time. Anyway, guys, off limits, that would be free speech. Yep, that's the truth. To have a healthy, honest, rigorous intellectual debate requires free speech. That's one of many reasons it's so important, and that would be a natural law. Jack out. Have a good day.